I'm pretty torn on the series, and I didn't expect to be. Like, I'm going to take the Clippers, and I want to say in 6 games. But do you think there's any potential here for an upset?
If it were to be any game, this would be the game to be it. I think the Mavs were the one team who is not necessarily like in that upper echelon of like the Nuggets, the Lakers, or the Clippers, right? Who could possibly beat any of those teams on like a really good night.
I'd say that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I do give the edge to the Clippers, but if there was any team to do, like if you told me if you set the series against, if you put Mavs next to any of the people, I'm like the Mavs could be every single one of those teams on a good given night.
Yeah, that's kind of where I sit. I mean, how many games do you think it takes Clippers to get them out of there? Because generally speaking, I don't think it's going to be a sweep or anything like that.
I think 6 games, but I'm not even gonna lie. I wouldn't even be surprised if it went to a 7th game.
That's kind of where I stand. Now, obviously, the Clippers can come out and be like, y'all must have forgot Roy Jones Jr. on our ass. But I would be really surprised, man. I think the Mavs, and it's worth noting, the regular season series, the Clippers won all the games. It's worth noting that. But also, we're in a weird situation right now with the bubble and everything. That does not matter. Everything that happened in the regular season, before, doesn't matter. It does not matter whatsoever. And obviously it matters because that's how his team's got to this point. But dude, the Nets are 5-2. The Suns are undefeated. Teams like the Thunder are looking really, really good that did not look like this before. Teams with a defensive advantage. It depends on the day, because sometimes you're seeing teams that are really, really good, good on defense, good defensive advantage, and they're shutting down teams because teams can't get hot. But then again, if there's a shooter like a TJ Warren who's just randomly going off, these weird stuff happens, so you don't know. And even though they lost the season series, they got swept in the season series, I think there's a decent chance they take off 2 games, maybe even take it to a 7-game series. But we're both in agreement that the Clippers are going to end up getting them out of there. In the next matchup, Nuggets Jazz. This may be unpopular. I'm going to take Denver and probably 4 or 5 games. I'm just not a believer in the Jazz this season.
They're a team who I think are they perform, but they not perform to the standard they probably should be, if that makes any sense. Even though they still do well, but not. There's we want more, but there hasn't been more. It's they're doing good, very well, but it's not like they haven't taken that extra step to elevate themselves, And the Nuggets are that's another team who, I'd say that's a team that people completely forget about all the time. It's the Nuggets all the time for years. I've been a Nuggets believer since 2016, 2017. I've been there for a while. 2015. I don't know. I've been there for a while now. I've had faith in the Nuggets for the longest time. They could be the team who could come out of the West, potentially. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I think if it wasn't if it wasn't the Lakers or the Clippers and you had to give a third option, I'd say it'd be the Nuggets.
Honestly, I kind of agree. And I think they get slept on a lot. And I'm somebody who I honestly sleep on them. I'm not going to lie. I forget that sometimes this team is they're right there from being the 2 seed. They were the 2 seed last year.
They were almost there last year.
They were almost there last year. I think they could have potentially made the finals, hypothetically, if they got by the Blazers. I think the Blazers were just a bad matchup for them. I think they potentially could have beaten the Warriors last year. Now, Warriors were depleted, but still, you know what I mean?
Still would have made it, though.
They are, and they've looked really, really good in the bubble, too. So, it's worth noting that they are also 3-0 in the season series. Jazz have looked, I'm not a believer in them for the long haul. I think the Jazz could spring an upset here. I would not be that surprised to see them win. But I think Denver closes it out. I think they're closing it out 5 or 6. I said 4 or 5. I'm changing it to 5 or 6. I think Utah too good of a team to get closed out in 4.
And then playoff basketball is just different, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be weird seeing playoff basketball in this atmosphere because, everything's different, everything's weird. So we're going to have to see how it plays out. The last Western Conference matchup, and it's one that strikes too close to home for me.
It does, doesn't it?
Houston Rockets taking on Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder actually finishing with the higher well, I guess it actually depends, but as of right now, they are the 4 seed. So it looks like we won that trade. No, but but yeah. So anyways, Rockets Thunder, man. Both teams 44 and 27 as of this speaking. Russell Westbrook got injured last night. I don't know how bad it is. He's gonna miss the start of the series though, so that's something to watch out for. But man, I think this is my most conflicted matchup. I was like of all the series that is going to be happening, I am so conflicted, man. I really, really am because on one hand, OKC has looked really, really good. I'd say, especially in the bubble, so to speak. I thought they were a team that would like if they got hot in the bubble, they could be a team to make it all the way to the finals. And they've beaten the Heat, they've beaten the Wizards, and we've been resting a lot of our guys too because a lot of this roster has kind of had guys with injury problems, dudes that are a bit older. CP3 needs to not play all the time, but in the bubble beat up on the Jazz, the Lakers, Wizards, Heat, only losses to the Grizz and the Suns, so that's not terrible. So listen, man, and then the Rockets have been playing small ball and they've been looking really, really good for the vast majority of the season. Like they were struggling to start and looked like they got it together, and then the season got postponed, and now they've come back. They've looked okay at times, and now Russell's hurt. I think with all of that said, and it pains me to say, I still got the Rockets moving on in six games probably. What do you think?
I still, out of all the matchups, even there's another one that's in the East that we'll talk about that I think this is probably the one that I think could be the most competitive, like, for this first set, of games that we're getting and, following into the second round. This potentially could be the grittiest, hardest, most competitive game. Could be. I'm speaking now. In reality, it could be a different story. But we'll have to see. I think I don't know what matchup wise. I just think it's right there in competitiveness, like the grittiness. It's going to be a fight for these guys on both ends to get through. I do have the Rockets edging it out. I'm saying 6 games. Potentially 7, man. This is another series I could think potentially could go to 7, just because of the nature of the teams. But I could be wrong. Anything could happen. But I'll stick to 6 games.
Yeah, that's where I currently am. I think it's going to go down in 6. And listen, I would feel a lot better about the Thunder potentially getting this done if James Harden just he's always busted our ass. It's just one of those things. James Harden busting OKC's ass ever since he's left. It's just one of those things. We're never going to stop him. Roberson is a guy who, in his prime, Roberson's looked a lot slower since coming back. Now, his shooting's looked improved. I'll give him a lot of credit. It looks like he's one of those guys that, he according to all the stuff, his shooting block, and it's just terrible three-point shooting, is mostly mental. And it looks like he's kind of improved a lot as a shooter, especially as like a cutter in terms of playing.
It's because of the bubble, dude.
It's because of the bubble. And his offenses look pretty good, but you can tell he's taken a lot of a step back. Maybe it's because he's rusty. Again, he was out for, 2 years, which is insane to even come back. But still, he's looked pretty rusty. And I generally think that, I think in his prime, he could probably do a lot more. And I think if Roberson, was not coming off a super bad injury, if he was fully healthy, I think we win this series because he's the only person I've seen to contain Harden pretty well. But I think Harden's going to go off. I think here's the thing. I don't think any team is going to win almost any of these games in a blowout. I think almost every single game in the series is going to be close. I think it might get wrapped in 6 or 7. But I do think the Rockets are going to come out on top. Now, we're going to move on to the East. Milwaukee, Orlando. There's no interest in this matchup whatsoever. Do you think any of these games? I'm not even going to ask you.
Hey man, DJ Augustine could have a return from last year. We saw. Hey man, all jokes aside, DJ Augustine did come up in the playoffs last year, so it was a worthless win at the end of the day. But man, did he show? He has some fight in him, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some fight in him. I thought they did a really good job. Didn't they play the Raptors last year in the playoffs?
I think that's what it was, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I know they took a game off. They might have even taken 2 games off. But yeah, I know they got some fight in them. That was last year, man. I think
this is the new year.
this is the new year,
This
and
is
Orlando has not
MVP.
looked good.
It's MVP Giannis this year. All defensive player of the year Giannis this year too. It's a scary time.
Yeah, and he's gonna be coming off a suspension. He's gonna be angry.
Oh yeah, he's mad. He's gonna headbutt someone.
Yeah, for sure. Again.
Again.
No, but
this is probably the one game that is a 4-0. It may be in a blue moon. The
no.
DJ Augustine has another good game.
Here's the problem, right? I would agree. I would fully agree if Orlando has not looked terrible. Like Orlando is in like if the East was any better, I don't think Orlando's won a single game in the bubble.
Probably
I
not.
think they've lost every single game.
That's what I'm saying. The Bucks get a 4-0 here.
Yeah, they're gonna get a 4-0. Like even the Nets, like I think they beat the Nets in their first game. Unless I remembering. I know the Nets beat them again. Yeah, they beat the Nets and they beat the Kings. Those are the only two teams they've beaten in the bubble, and then they lost. Pacers by 11, Raptors by 6, and now they're just getting blown out. They're losing. They lost by 12 to the Nets. So, listen, man, I think it's gonna be a relatively quick 4-0. Do you think any of the games are even close at least?
Like I tell you, like maybe one if that, like maybe they sneak, but it's so unlikely, man. It's so unlikely.
Yeah, I got 4-0 for Milwaukee. Moving on to a series that also probably a 4-0, sadly. Toronto, Brooklyn. Do you think Brooklyn takes a game off? I think Brooklyn
is more likely to, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're more likely. I think they've been looking good lately, but I think that's more of a virtue of a lot of teams are resting their players. Like they're 5-2 in the bubble, and they beat the Magic, who've looked terrible. The Clippers, who are resting a lot of players. The Kings. Now they do have some legit good wins. The Bucks, and the Bucks. Every other team they beat is either not in the playoffs or just not very good. So, whatever. Shout out Brooklyn, though, to even be in this position. Do you think they take a game off?
If, like I told you, it's more likely that they take a game than the Magic, but it should be, in theory, another sweep, man.
Yeah, I think it's also going to be a sweep. I could easily, I don't want to say easily see them taking a game. I could see them taking a game potentially. But I am going to go Toronto 4. Now, series I am very, very iffy on. Boston, Philadelphia. Hindsight would say Boston has this in the bag. They've looked a lot better this season. Philadelphia, Ben Simmons is out right now. Joel Embiid is struggling with injuries.
Always.
That's
his only issue as a player.
Yeah, especially right now. Do you think this one's any sort of compelling with all the stuff Philly's going through right now? Do you think this is like a compelling matchup, or do you think that Boston's going to run them?
Yeah, I mean, Tobias is still there. The addition of Richardson, I mean, and obviously the role players they got. I mean, it's still a good team. And then if you include, Embiid and Ben into the mix, it's just it's always been an injury thing with those two guys. And then Ben, I mean, I've always had my doubts about Ben. Not as a bad player, but just I don't know. He has good aspects, but something sometimes lacks in him. I don't know what it is outside of the shooting, obviously, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know. He just doesn't fully show up for me. Personally, I've always felt like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a hater. That's kind of been it with me. As far as matchup wise, though, I feel like if the Sixers were fully healthy, I'd give it to the Sixers. The only issue is it's completely a health issue right now, and that's the only reason I'm going into the Celtics. But yeah, I mean, but if the Sixers are healthy and they show up, the Sixers could win this like in a competitive fashion, like 6 games. But I think it's more likely for Boston to take it right now, unless the Sixers just show up and are healthy. But it really is just a health thing with them.
Yeah. I mean, the Sixers coming into the season for me, I was like, there's two paths they can kind of go down. I figured they would either be a team because they have a lot of good players, but they have a lot of weird positions for them. Horford is one of their best players, but Embiid's the starter at center. So they've got a lot of Tobias, who's a really good guy, but we didn't see him, He only looked kind of okay with Philly last year. And now they've got this squad, and they have a lot of really, really good players. And either they're going to fit well together or they haven't. They have not fit well together. But at the same point, they're pure talent, and especially in a playoff setting where you're going to see these dudes going 100% and like just that pure talent, maybe that's something they can rely on. I would also give it to Philly if they were healthy. But Ben Simmons being out and Embiid being hurt, I got to give it to Boston in like 6 or 7. I just think it's going to be too much for them to overcome. And the problem is that Philly actually leads the season series 3-1, and their only loss was like one where I think somebody was hurt too, and that was in February. So I'm gonna go Boston this one. I think this is a weird circumstance where if Philly, even though they're the 6th seed, I think if they were healthy they'd win it, but nonetheless they are not healthy. Miami and Indiana, the last series to predict, and it's the one that, in terms of emotions, in terms of intensity, it's the one I'm most excited for. Obviously, earlier this year, T.J. Warren and Jimmy Butler were straight up about to come to blows during their game in January, and basically Jimmy Butler was talking a lot of shit. He was circling the game on the calendar for when they were going to play him next. That never happened. Obviously, we had the pandemic going on. Instead, now they're going to play.
Better.
It's even better because T.J. Warren is going to be all-team first bubble. Oh shit! I forgot they're gonna have to give out awards for that. We can give our own awards out for that. The bubble MVP, because T.J. Warren's been going off, but guess what? He struggled one game. You know what that game was against? Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. They played a couple days ago. Heat whooped their ass.
He got nervous.
Not even close. Who do you got in this series, my man? I think in terms of like intensity, emotions, it's the one I'm most looking forward to.
You know, I'll tell you this. The Pacers are not at the same level of the Nuggets, but they are a sleeper team for me where it's like, dude, if they get better and if they have things going, they could be like the Nuggets equivalent, but in the East. It's just that they're still they're young. I think they're probably the youngest squad out of that whole group. I'm assuming Miami has too many vets to say that, and then definitely not the Bucks. Or I'm sure the Sixers are decently young too. But yeah, they're a very young team. They have a lot of potential. But dude, Miami, like I've told you, Miami's been my surprise team of the year, dude, as a whole. Like, not expecting them to do this good. Like, if you told me Robinson, Harrow, Bam would have this kind of a surgence, I would have never expected it. But they have. And Goran being back and healthy, I mean, that helps a lot too. They are a scary team. They have nothing to lose, and they are a force to be reckoned with.
That's kind of my thought process as well. I think the Heat are that team where, like, I think if they get on a roll, and I think they can use this series to potentially parlay it into something even bigger, whether that be Eastern Conference Finals, I don't know. But they match up so well together as like a team, and Jimmy Butler is the leader, and they got so many dudes who they're all contributing so much, and you wouldn't expect that out of them. I think they're going to take the